Morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Keep Up with Pryme. Today, we are taking a closer look at the newest features across our applications that are relevant for the accounting firms. By the way, I'm Laura from marketing, and joining me is Aske Holst, product manager at Pryme Global. As usual, should you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat or the Q&A, and we will take a look at those at the end of the presentation. And now, over to you, Aske. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Laura. So this time we're looking at the features that we have released in May, but also a few of them have come in the April and the March releases. And we're looking specifically at features that are relevant to accounting. So if you're looking for features that are more broadly applicable to other industries, I would recommend having a look at some of our other industry webinars. They can be found on YouTube. So let's jump in and see what new features we have. First up, I've structured this as the life cycle of a matter with a setup phase, a planning phase, a work phase, and an invoicing and work in progress phase. Starting with the setup phase, we have some new features related to contracts. Contracts, of course, are great for combining multiple matters together and working with those as a complete set. And of course, using that for invoicing as well, if you want to have combined invoicing for multiple matters. So if I go to a contract, we have a new feature here where it is a lot easier to work with multiple matters. I can, on my matter, go in under the contract, and we've had the related matters for a long time. Now we also have a feature where you can add additional matters to this. So I could select one more matter and say, assign this. And of course, I can only do that to the part of a contract, which is a posting task. So I'll select one more and then assign that, and that also becomes part of that contract. And of course, I can select as many as I would like. So it's just a little bit easier to add to a contract. In the past, you had to go to the matter and select the contract the matter was part of. Next up, we have a number of features related to resources. So this is not strictly related to matters themselves, but of course, having the right resources set up in the system is critical in order to track time, because we track time on people, and people are represented by resources in the system. So first up, we have some copying features where you can copy a resource or a user or both. So if you have an existing user resource, you have a new employee, you can just copy that over if it is a similar setup and role. We also have some templates if you don't want to go the copying route, and there's an import function if you want to add a lot of resources at the same time. That could be when setting up a whole new legal entity, or if there's a big number of resources being employed at the same time. And lastly, we have some features related to resource group updates. So let's jump into it. From the resources, if I open that up, I can go in and I can select to copy a user/resource. And from in here, I can select if I want to copy the user or the resource, or only the user or just the resource. And if I want to only copy the resource, I would select who am I copying from. Maybe I'm copying from Cassie. And my new resource is called John. There's an email address. There's a lot of additional information, but most of the information is copied over from Cassie. It is just the extra information that is personal to this individual that I add. You can also add related information. That could be matter permissions, that could be prices, that could be dimensions. We will set an employment date, and if we set an end date for timesheets, then it will automatically create timesheets for this new resource, and the same for capacity. So it's very easy to copy resources this way. You can also use it to copy users, where you can select what user we are copying from, what we are copying to. And this mostly makes sense if we are copying permissions or settings or setup in some regard. So it's very similar, and often the two are, of course, connected as both a user and a resource. If we more want to create from scratch, we can just select we want a new resource, and this would be the normal way. But what we can do here is we can set up a resource template. So under template setups, I can design different resource templates, and then I can use those. And the resource templates will include a number of settings. I have a resource template here for associate, where I have said that associates are always part of a certain resource group. They have certain posting groups. They're not marked as matter responsibles, etc. They cannot approve their own time. All these default settings, that goes on to the resource template card. And then when I go to create a new resource, I can use that template and get that applied. I can also use the templates on import. So if I select to import resources, I can add a number of lines in here with all the resources I want to create in one go. So name and title and email, etc. And most importantly, if we have, let's say, we have a new resource, Alice, I can select that Alice is an associate, and so that template will be applied. So a lot of the settings will come from a template. Here I can even say create an import template, so I get an Excel file with all the fields. Then when I have filled in the Excel, I can import that Excel file back again, so I get that pre-filled. So it makes it a lot easier, especially for implementation of new companies. So let's see if I can find my presentation again. So that was the setup. New features for contracts and resources. Oh, and I forgot the resource group update. That one is actually interesting. So when you're changing the resource group on a existing resource, let's say for Cassie here, she is currently part of the resource group of lawyers. Maybe she's going to be part of the partners resource group. When I change this, I will get a question now if I want to update existing entries. That could be budget entries, that could be capacity entries, that could be work assignments, where you sometimes can have a difference in resource group from the resource group the resource is part of. Now you can update this automatically. And that might make a difference for pricing and forecasting calculations. So just making it a little bit easier. With that in place, we can move over to the next area, which is planning. And within planning, we're working with work items and budgets. Within work items, we have added work item categories, and we've added a feature to include the period in names on recurring items. I will explain that. And for budgets, we have budget journals that can now import from Excel. So when you're working with work items, you can create recurring work items. So let's say we have a matter here, and I want to create some work items. And so I scroll over and say we would like to do some recurring services. Do we have some work items? Let's create a new work item. I will apply a template for, let's say, payroll, for instance. So we're doing payroll on this, and we can say this is set to, by template, be recurring monthly. And if I set a start date here, let's just send it. Let's say we are starting at the end of the year, at the beginning of the year. And if we are doing this, of course, it would be, we would usually set this up not at the current time. Then I can calculate my recurrences. And we've had this function in the past as well, where we can do that. So we're doing this monthly. And let's see, why doesn't it allow me to? Okay, so we're doing 27 instead. Okay, so you cannot do something recurring that was in the past. That actually makes sense. So let's do it this way. And so we are saying we are starting this on the 27th and we're ending on 27 as well. And now we have our recurrences. And the new feature is that we now get the period in here. So we don't just get payroll, but we get payroll for February, March, April, etc., the rest of the year. And that makes it a lot easier to see what each work item is for. And of course, it doesn't have to be a month name. It could also be a week name or a year name if it's recurring in another way. So just to make it easier to see what you're assigned to and what you should be working on. On the work items, there is also now the possibility to set a category. So if I show more here, now we have a category and I can decide a category of work. In this case, maybe it is a category of payroll that allows me to do filtering across all my work items to only see a specific category of time. Within budgets, if I'm working on a budget for a project or a matter, and you're doing that externally in Excel, we now have a feature to import budgets from Excel. You first create an import template, fill in that template, and then you can import from Excel. So if you're working external budgets, a lot easier now. Next up, the area of work. Time tracking is, of course, an important feature. And one of the things we've added in this release is an external time tracker. You might have noticed that I have a time tracker running here as a small Windows application. And this is tracking the time I'm currently working. I'm in the meeting for Keep Up with Accounting. I've been in this for 14 minutes and 35 seconds. And this is to make it easier to keep tracking your time without having to go into Business Central and open that up. You can have this running in the background. Now I've set this to be on top always, so it kind of is always there. If I had a bigger screen, it might not take up as much space, but this is always running. And I can, of course, move it around. I can look at the details where I can set what is the project, what is the task. Maybe I've just set this to be administration. Well, this is actually a training, so I set that as well. And when I'm done with this, I would say, yeah, I'm stopping this and I'm doing something else. So let's do something else. And we can see this is already running. I can just keep saying, okay, at this point, I'm just interested in seeing I'm doing something else. But I could also go in and say, well, I am working with Alpine Ski House on ongoing tax reports, and this is general work. Perfect. Now this is done. I could even add a work type that this is non-billable work or whatever it is. And this flows back into Business Central. So I have this as my time tracking, but I don't have to think about this is Business Central. This is just a small little app that keeps track of all the different things I've done during the day. Then in the end, when I go back into Business Central to finish up my timesheets, all that information is in here. So if I open up this, actually I can open this up with a button as well. That's an open in PC, but now I have Business Central open already. I can see in my calendar here that this is what I've been tracking on, keeping up with accounting, and then currently working on something else after that. So I have that information. Of course, it keeps track of all that information. This was internal administration and whatever it was. So it keeps track of that, and then I can create my timesheet based on it. So for a lot of people who feel that maybe Business Central, bit much to keep that open, have that small time tracker running. When we look forward, we will also release this not just as a Windows app, but also for other platforms, both for mobile and Apple, Mac, for those that are on that platform. But currently it is the Windows app that you have to install and keep running. With that in place, we can look at the next feature, which is daily timesheet totals. It is a small thing, but it does help in some cases where if you have your timesheet and you have a lot of different work done on different days, you can then go and look at this in this matrix view we had for a long time, but now we're showing totals for each of the days up here. So we can see on this date, I have 4.5 hours in total because of course I have 2 and 2.5. Might be easy to see here, but if you have a lot of entries, it might be nice to know the totals for each day. It is basically the same that we are showing in this graph. This also shows 4.5 hours, but some like to have it directly in there. So small change, a bit of more information to show. Then we have some features related to AP automation. So this is not specifically related to matters, but if you're using the Pryme AP automation, we've added some features for automatically creating, setting up vendor bank accounts, and also for some new rules for invoice rounding. If you have vendors with special rounding rules and you want to align with those for the setup and approval of purchase invoices, we can do that now. In the invoicing area, we've added a undo feature, something that we don't see that much in Business Central, but it is something that has been requested, and that is for the closing feature. So the close invoice lines feature is something that we've had for a very long time, where when you have entries on a project, you can decide to write those entries off. So I might have an entry for some time and I say, yeah, we cannot invoice this. We have to do a write-off. We would do that with a close invoice lines. That creates an additional entry saying this is a write-off. If we're looking in the client engagement report, we can then see it is marked as a write-off. It is something that should have been charged, but we weren't able to get paid for it. That is a close invoice lines. If you happen to use this by mistake, or later come back and realize we shouldn't have done a write-off, that has been hard to do. You would have to use journals to get back to the original state. We made that easier with the undo close invoice line. So you can simply go back again and undo the write-off, so to say. So small button makes it a lot easier when you need it. If you're working in an organization that has multiple companies and you're using the intercompany feature to transfer time and cost between companies, we now allow you to transfer binary data as well. That could be pictures, that could be documents. And where we specifically use it at the moment is we've now allow you to transfer document attachments. So for instance, if you have expenses that are transferred from one company to another, and there are receipts or other proof of that transaction that can flow over and be visible in the other company as well. Lastly, if we're using the subcontracting feature, we have added approval workflows and also a feature to automatically create self-billing invoices for those vendors or subcontractors where they expect to get a self-billing invoice. The workflows you will need to enable in the workflow setup. So if we have subcontractor statements here, I haven't enabled any workflows. That means if I look at a subcontractor statement, I have the regular features to approve and reopen and close. And there is no workflow around it. If I want to have a workflow where only certain people can approve this or actually must approve it, then I would need to enable the approval workflow. And I do that from the workflows features in Business Central, where I can create a new workflow based on the subcontractor template. So if I open up and say new workflow from template, I should see a subcontractor template. Sometimes it doesn't show up. If it doesn't, then you might need to go back to the workflow templates and do a reset of those workflow templates. So I can do that. Reset templates. That might take a little while, and then you should have the template for the subcontractor approval workflow, and that will show up in the list in the section for subcontractor statements. So we can see here that I now have a template for Pryme subcontractor statement approval workflow. I can use that to create a new workflow. So workflows and new workflow from template. Select the Pryme subcontractor statement approval workflow, and I have my workflow defined. Here I can, of course, add changes to what are the rules for the approvals, who should approve. Is it the purchaser for that subcontractor? Is it the project manager? Are there some other rules, etc.? And with this enabled, I will now see that it changes how the subcontractor statement approval works. My direct approval disappears, and now I can do sending of approval requests and, of course, canceling those, and the approval will get the possibility to actually do the approval, and we can track the history of approvals as well. So if you're using subcontractors to do part of the work, this makes it a lot easier to approve that work. That concludes this section of this presentation where we're looking at new features, and let's look at the future. So we have a roadmap for the future here. What are we going to do going forward? And I've slimmed this down a little bit to what is relevant to legal and accounting. Looking at Q2, which is where we're currently at, but we still have a few features to release. We are doing some more features for API automation, some better connection with working with matters, and we're releasing a new risk management app where you can do risk assessments on different matters, but also on vendors and customers. So that could be big customers where there is a risk to be managed. You can set up risk management, have a risk register, look at mitigation steps, recurring review, risk matrices, and so on to manage that risk. In next quarter, Q3, we will do some new features for rollover of matters. So if you have a matter for 1 year and you want to roll it over and make changes to dates and naming, we will add that. Also, matter creation, we will have a way to request that. This is not really set in stone. We have a number of new features coming in also related to client creation, and we might swap that around. The timeline for that is not really firm, but something in this area of time. When it comes to time tracking, we will have some new features for working with description. That will be a new policy set where you can set up different policies for how description should look like. We will use those policies if you're using the feature to improve descriptions automatically, but we can also use it to rate descriptions. So if you have an invoice with hundreds of lines with descriptions, you can say, well, rate these according to the policies that we have set, mark those that are not complying or are less compliant, and then you can edit those. And for the editing part of it, we will have a new interface where you can edit multiple descriptions in one go and have some features that allow you to do updates in multiple places, things like search and replace that you know from other places. Hopefully that should mean that you no longer need to export that data out into something like Excel and bring it back again. When we look into work planning, there will be some features for required skills. So if you have certain pieces of work that require a certain skill, a certification, some kind of work, you can put that on and say, well, for this task, you need a certain skill to perform the work, and you can only assign work items to have that skill set. It could be one skill, it could be multiple skills that you must have. We will also introduce the concept of work sets. This kind of ties together with the project or the matter creation and the matter rollover, where as soon as you create a new matter, you would like to have a set of work included, a standard set of things we usually do for a customer like this. So you predefine that. I'll skip over the subcontracting and for the reporting side, that's a small feature, but I think people will find it interesting where we get the possibility to update ledger entry dimensions. So if something has been posted to the wrong dimension, you will be able to edit that. And when we get to risk management, we will keep working on that and add some AI features where you can use Copilot to identify risks. Looking even further into the future, end of the year, beginning of next year, we will look at capacity planning for work items, looking at how much time do we set aside to do a piece of work and compare that with the capacity of different resources and try to do some intelligent planning on that. And for matters and clients, we will add some features for better invoice review and approval. When we get to time tracking, we will look at that standalone tracker that I showed earlier and add that for mobile and other platforms. And we will also introduce the concept of multi-day time tracking for people that are working across days. So starting late at night and working into the early morning as one work pass. Hopefully not that often done, but sometimes it happens and we want to be able to support that scenario of working across midnight. And within purchasing, we will add some features for electronic invoices and agents.